Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for showing up. It's really early for us as well. We'll all try to make it as easy as possible for everybody to understand. So I'm gonna start by introducing my fellow speakers real quick. This is Max. He works for EY in Switzerland, and he's the Web3 and Metaverse strategy lead in Switzerland, and also founder of the Swiss blockchain. What's the name?
Swiss Metaverse Association.
Sorry. This is Olga Broviy. She is also working for EY. She's a certified tax advisor, and she's based in Dubai and responsible for the Web3 and Metaverse strategy in Middle West. My name is Anna. I also work for EY, but only part-time. I'm a legal clerk, so I also work for the financial court in Hamburg, Germany. So when we were talking about what we're gonna talk about on the panel today, just recently we had the FTX scandal, and I read some reports that in 2022, more than $20.1 billion have been used for illicit purposes in the metaverse for crypto transactions, and that made supervisors and regulators stand up for stricter rules for regulating the metaverse for cryptocurrencies. And maybe we need to take a step back and think, do we really need stricter regulations? But first, let us introduce you to what kind of regulations we have, and we're gonna focus on taxes. Olga is gonna introduce you to where, when an NFT is sold, we even need to look at the different stations and when is tax even due. So, Olga.
Yeah, since we're speaking about NFTs, we thought that definitely what would be good is to explain the marketplace, because this is the platforms where we can sell and buy it. On the marketplace level, we have actually 4 main participants. First of is creators and issuers of NFTs. Then we have the marketplace or service provider itself. Then we have the buyers, and of course, NFT as a digital asset. Now, if we speak about taxation, what kind of tax risk and tax exposures we could have here? At the creator level, it could be conducted with in 2 possible ways. It could be a freelancer, if it is a freelancer. Then we could have income tax consequences, and if the activity is conducted on the corporate level with the entities, then we would pay corporate tax, and it depends in which jurisdiction you are located or resident. We would then have, I don't know, state or local tax or trade tax, for example, as in Germany. Sometimes it depends also on which jurisdiction you are resident. You would also have the issues with value-added tax. Now we're moving to the marketplace. We know that the main activities of the marketplace is the earnings on the margin, and mostly it is the entities, and in the entities levels, as I already explained you, we would pay the normal corporate trade tax. In our praxis, the major issue what we already saw on the marketplaces level, it was the value-added tax, because you know that as individuals, you logged in with your wallet, and you really need to try to understand where the people are resident, and not every service provider have a really good KYC, so you cannot determine the location. Therefore, for VAT purposes, it's super complicated then to understand in which jurisdictions the corporation need to be resident for VAT purposes. So yeah, definitely consult your tax advisor before you start it and before you would like to sell your NFTs in different countries. Super relevant, at least from the value-added perspective. Then the buyer. Here, I would also like to emphasize more value-added perspective, because if you have electronic supplied services, what is relevant for you is to understand, as a seller, you need to register yourself at the country of the buyer. So therefore, also a couple of things that need to be considered. And I don't know, Max, what we had on the buyer side in Switzerland?
Yeah, so maybe one interesting fun fact about Switzerland: when you trade stocks, for example, and you're a private person, you don't pay capital gains tax on it. And the same principle kind of applies also in the digital world. NFTs aren't specifically mentioned in the regulations by the FINMA, which is the supervisory authority in Switzerland. But the stocks example, I think, is a good one, because do we need stricter rules? Maybe. I think we need clearer rules. Because, so take me as an individual, as a private person, I trade my stocks, I don't pay any capital gain tax. If I'm institution, I do pay taxes on it. So, but what happens in between? So then it comes to frequency, what's the volume of the trade, so on and so forth. The same logic also applies to the NFTs, but the NFTs are a little bit different. So is it really the same? Probably not. So I think here the regulations definitely need to be clearer. So, yeah.
And the last our participant in the chain, it is NFT as a substance, as the digital asset. What kind of problems we, of course, have is by the valuation and by the estimation of the value of the assets, because as we know, there is a lot of regulations how you need to do it. Of course, you can use IFRS or some national regulation for that, but the lacking of the information or of the regulation, it is exactly what makes so complicated. But this is the point what you need to consider by NFTs itself. Then about, let us speak now shortly about legal considerations. Anna, can you say something for seller requirements?
Yes, thank you, Olga. So we will come back to seller requirements later when we talk about MiCA, because this one puts some obligations to register it and more transparency obligations on the seller. But let's come to legal ownership, which is interesting in Germany because you can only be a legal owner of tangible assets. And NFT is basically just data. So we have this whole discussion, how do I even own an NFT, or how do I own data, because you cannot be an owner of the data on the blockchain. And another discussion is, can I maybe assign an NFT, but then it would have to be a right or a claim, which is not. And the other problem is that, for example, if an NFT is attached to a tangible asset in the real world and you want to prove your ownership, it's not. Basically, this is only possible for the first transaction of the NFT. And later on, you can also transfer the NFT without the tangible good in the real world. So I might be a holder of an NFT that is supposed to prove my legal ownership, but then I already gave away the tangible good in the real world, because we don't have a law like when you sell a house that it needs to be registered in the public register. So if you want to prove your ownership with an NFT, we would have to have new rules and new laws for this. But coming back to taxes, not being able to be an owner of an NFT in civil law doesn't mean the NFT cannot be assigned to you for tax issues. And Olga, you wanted to say more about tax issues.
Actually, only 2 sentences to add. So you know that as EY, we're working with the multinational concerns or the bigger groups, and they have a lot of cross-border transactions. And now we see the situation that they could have the digital assets in the different countries, and they are just thinking, okay, I have it in a wallet, I can just move it, it's so easy like it is, but unfortunately not. Once we have the cross-border transaction, we would have a tax exposure. So this is also what we always try to emphasize and try to make our clients sensible, not just only to transfer is from the cross-border perspective. And the last point from the legal considerations, what we also see, especially from the German perspective, we have a lot of startups or a lot of companies who would like to do an exit, because Germany is a country where we have the most the highest tax rates, and we do a location analysis for the different jurisdictions where the startups or companies in the Web3 area could go. For example, if you go to Middle East and you would like to open or establish a company in Dubai, you need to consider that you always need a license. And to establish the license, you need at least 3 or 4 months to get this. And it is not clear whether you can do it in free zone or not. So also market and geographical considerations need to be considered if you wanted to have a Web3 or NFT or blockchain business. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. Since today we're speaking about regulatory, we have, as EY, a lot of communication with the financial authorities or with another regulatory authorities. And we put on the slide the major player states. So what you need now to have on your radar as authority in order to be compliant and in order to be just up to date with all informations what we have now. And we put firstly DAO. I think everyone knows that is a corporation on the code. We struggle a lot with this because you know how quickly this corporation could be established. And after this, the clients comes to us and asking for legal and tax advice. And only a couple of states in US, they recognize DAO, and I think we talked about Philippines and a couple of other countries where we have it, but in Germany you don't have the regulation for this. We don't know whether it is a permanent establishment or a corporation. So what we would definitely say before establish one, contact the legal advisor and try to put it for you in the best way. The next thing what you should have as authority on the radar is decentralized finance instruments. So therefore, what is relevant that different countries have different regulations. And from German perspective, Anna?
So DeFi, we have a letter of the financial authority in Germany. And it also addresses lending, staking, how you should declare your incomes from that. And we have the BaFin, which is the German supervisory on financial issues, the authority for that. And they also put up laws and requirements how to register once you want to issue a token that is seen as a financial instrument.
And maybe one thing to the DAO, because I mean DAO has obviously been one of the buzzwords of the last year and still kind of is. And you see a lot of DAOs popping up, but I think it's very, very important to make sure you really understand as an investor, as someone who buys into a DAO, that what is behind the DAO. Is it really a DAO? How is it set up legally? I mean, that becomes very important when, I don't know, if you want to sue something, when you lost your funds, who do you call? Who's responsible? Who's liable? And very often it's not really a DAO, just to say that, to spoil the beans a little bit. The next thing I'm very excited about is digital identity. Just to give an example, I had to get a new passport. So I'm German, I live in Switzerland, I had to get a new passport. Very, very tricky process. Long story short, I had to take a day off, travel to Bern, live in Zurich, which is like basically a half-day trip. So it would be a lot more efficient to do the whole thing virtually. But when you look at like what would be required to do this virtually, it's not only, okay, I have the contact person, but also my identity online. What does it actually mean technically, of course, but also how do you get regulatory bodies and politics on board to create the whole ecosystem, which is a very interesting journey that I hope lies ahead of us.
From the regulatory perspective, we actually wanted that you, from this panel, at least take 3 main frameworks, what we have now in the world in place in order to regulate also NFTs. First is CARV. It is a crypto asset reporting framework. It is a tax transparency report with model rules for automatic reporting and exchange information for tax individuals. We know that I think almost 37 countries are in the membership who will introduce this regulation, and the informations between all these entities or states need to be exchanged. On the European level.
Yes, so just to add to CARV, it's just a treaty that the countries have with each other. You cannot see it as a law. And now coming down to the European perspective, the European Union, they put up MiCA. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard it. I'm just gonna go really fast over it. First, NFTs were excluded, which just saying they were excluded, I think it creates a wrong impression because it makes it sound like utility token, security token, and investment token were included, and everything that is called an NFT is excluded. So once I issue NFTs, I don't have to pay attention to MiCA, which is a misconception because an NFT, depending on what rights it gives you or what perks it has, is it maybe taking Bored Apes? I think they are considered investment tokens, so they would be included in MiCA. So you really need to look into the NFT. What rights does it give you? How does it work? To see whether it's included in MiCA. And now the European Parliament said they want to include NFTs when they are part of a collection of high volume. And I think it's really important to know that when you give the same rights or the same perks to NFT holders, just because there is a different profile picture doesn't mean it's non-fungible. Basically, every gym membership, I have my own card with my own picture with a different member number, and that doesn't mean my gym membership is non-fungible in terms of everybody else has the same rights. So that was it to MiCA, sorry about that. And then kind of connected with MiCA, we have DAC 8, which forces issuers to, which puts reporting obligations on token issuers, but this needs to be transferred to national law. So it's really way down the road. I think we cannot expect something before 2025. But I have brand new news from the European Union. Just last week, they voted in favor of the new anti-money laundering directive, and it was suggested that NFT issuers are to be added to the list of obliged entities. But also, this still needs to be negotiated with the council, and then if they agree, they still need to draft the final version of the anti-money laundering directive.
And the last 2 points, they are probably not direct something dealing with NFTs, but we still wanted to mention it, is data privacy and data compliance. To data privacy, I think we all heard about optimistic zero knowledge. This is the secure transaction on the blockchain. And by digital compliance, we're just so naive that we're thinking that financial statements, tax returns, and value-added returns, they could all be done on the blockchain, so therefore relevant for the tax authorities. And in order to end?
What was the ending again? So I think we're running out of time a little bit. One thing I wanted to mention is the Swiss Metaverse Association, not to promote it, but the idea is it's an association, so it's no non-profit, but the idea is to really make sure to build a platform for a dialogue with regulators, with different kind of companies. I think there are 50 completely random, diverse companies on it, to really exchange about ideas, but also give the platform and educate regulators, politicians about what's blockchain, what's an NFT. So maybe the misconception we heard, FTX in the beginning. Now a lot of people think of FTX when they think about crypto. When they think about NFTs, they think about crypto. So it's all in one pot if you're not deep into the topic. So that has to be changed. And I think one last word for me. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's why taxes are so important. They didn't get Al Capone for all his crimes. They got him on his taxes. So that's where they get you. So make sure you know how to get your taxes right.
Yes, thank you. And something really important that you mentioned is trying to find a conversation with politicians. The German government had a hearing, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago, and every party presented their own specialist in metaverse and blockchain. And basically, they just chose the expert by their view on the metaverse, on blockchain. And they all chose someone who hated on it, basically. So they dropped words like everything in cryptocurrency is drug money, the whole Web3, the whole blockchain, it doesn't work, it's gonna crash one day, and we shouldn't invest in this. And it's a really important issue to be addressed to politicians, maybe a big new project that really goes up to the government, explaining them their vision, make them understand what they want to do, and tell them, hey, we have these laws, but they're not well fitted for our new case. And be transparent and make politicians understand what's going on, because once we have rules and regulations, let's say top down from the government saying, we accept blockchain, we take this topic really, really seriously, we will have laws that make it easier for projects to comply with. Because what's the problem now with DAO, for example? When you want to have a DAO, it's not a legal form. That doesn't mean its activity is not regulated. But now if you want to have all these characterizations a DAO has, given its reliance on blockchain, you can of course have them in the partnership agreement. But compared to just founding a business where once you have a certain legal form, you just need to have it registered in a public register, and the law already tells you who is reliant. What's the word?
Liable?
Yeah, sorry, liable. Who is in charge? Who can represent the whole business? And you don't have this with DAO, so it gives all the work to the project. You have the burden of kind of regulating it yourself, so you can force it into a legal form to start your project. And we need laws that enable instead of suffocate the whole metaverse business, DAOs, everything. You want to add something to that, Olga?
Only one sentence, that we're just really trying by communication with the authorities to say that, yeah, regulation, please, yes, because big player would not do something in the field if we would not have it, but still we have blockchain in order to simplify everything. So therefore we need to find this 50-50 way. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.